Andy, thank you so much for joining us today.
Delighted, Alain. Very nice to speak to you.
So Andy, you are a management advisor and you have been in this business for over 25 years. I wonder if we could start the conversation by giving us a little bit of information about you, your background. How is it that you got into business and why is business your passion?
Yeah, so I got involved in business. I think when I was in my 20s, I left graduate school where I was doing a degree in political philosophy. And at some point I went, hey, the world doesn't need any more political philosophers. It really doesn't help. There's good work to be done in that field. It doesn't need another. So I looked for a job and I got interested in marketing. And then I sat down with to interview for a marketing job, and it was for a consulting company in London. And the guy interviewing me said, "Do you know that you're a natural born consultant?" And and what do you mean? I had no idea what a consultant was really at that point. And he said, "Yeah, you ask questions, you listen, and you formulate back to me what it is I'm really thinking. That adds clarity. And that is helping me to understand who you are. And I think it would help clients too." And so I got into it, and I was fortunate enough to work for McKinsey for some years, which was a great sort of learning about what consulting formally is, like what the practices of consulting are. But my career really changed, and I moved to IBM. I was given the role of working with IBM's emerging business opportunities. And that everything I've done subsequently over the last 20 years started the moment that I met my now business partners, Mike Tushman from the Harvard Business School and Charles O'Reilly from Stanford. I met them, they were working with IBM on this emerging business opportunity program, and everything changed at that point.
Well, that's odd. I mean, I had a few interviewees that have also worked for IBM and they have moved on to other careers. And the one thing that they have mentioned is that they found the bureaucracy asphyxiating, and that is a slow moving, very bureaucratic company. So you probably did work for another branch of IBM.
Yeah, no. So this was, in every story about a mammoth bureaucracy, and it is a mammoth bureaucracy, it certainly was then, there is this kind of bright light coming from a different direction, something which is entirely different running against that. And I just got lucky that that's what I was involved with. It was because after Lou Gerstner had done his famous turnaround in the 90s, we got to 2000, 2001, and the company was growing again. And they looked back at the 90s and noticed how many great firms had really been spawned by IBM, but they had ignored them. Siebel Systems in CRM, they had all of the technology to be doing routers and network switches and be Cisco, right? But they just ignored it. And so they set about to say, well, how could we choose just a few new ventures to start and set people free to do that, right? And they did that, and they built billion-dollar businesses inside this behemoth over the next 7 or 8 years.
Well, I mean, I agree with you. I mean, IBM is one of those few companies that have been part of the Standard & Poor's 500 for decades already. And one of the things that people point out is that this is one of the companies that have succeeded at reinventing themselves. I mean, yeah, let's be honest, the bureaucracy was asphyxiating the company for many years, maybe even decades, and it was on a decline until they saw the light and they saw that they had to innovate from the inside and
That's
maybe swallow their ego a little bit more and set ideas also from the exterior.
That's right. That's exactly the right thing. And what's really interesting, Alain, though, is that if you read the resignation letter of John Akers, who was the CEO of IBM in the early 90s, drove it to the point of bankruptcy, right? If you read his resignation letter, he describes his strategy. it's the exact same strategy that Lou Gerstner uses to turn the place around. It's not the case that it's never strategy, but often it's not, it's execution.
Right.
And that's what Gerstner got that made him so special and able to turn it around. And these new businesses were the same. It's not that we didn't already have the ideas, it's that we didn't get them done. That's what's different.
Right. Okay. Well, we are going to be speaking about your book, Corporate
Yeah.
Explorer, How
Yeah.
Corporations Can Beat Startups at the Innovation Game, which you co-wrote with two other people. Could you just tell us who your co-authors are?
Yeah. So this is Mike Tushman from the Harvard Business School and Charles O'Reilly from Stanford. And so Mike and Charles have for many years written around this and researched and helped firms around this question of how do you grow businesses inside existing corporations. And they're well known for this notion of the ambidextrous organization. How do you manage core and explore, or explore and exploit businesses simultaneously? So they've written a number of books. They just had a second edition of Lead and Disrupt come out last year. And so what's different about Corporate Explorer is that we're really focused on the individual character. What does somebody with a great idea for a new business do inside a corporation? Because they could go and set up a venture externally. They go find venture capital, become an entrepreneur, all this kind of thing. But a number of them don't. And they're still successful. And that's kind of counterintuitive. It's not what we think is happening in corporations. And so this book kind of tells the story of a number of people who've been successful, describes what they've done, and how not only they do the innovation piece, but how they also manage the change, how they do the execution of the idea.
At one time, I had the opportunity to interview a person by the name of Art Bell. And I don't know if you are familiarized with him or not. He's the one who created Comedy Central inside of the HBO channel.
Oh.
And he was a middle level manager, doing the day-to-day financial analyst stuff. But he was always attracted by comedy. And he proposed this idea to higher management, and he had to go to several layers because the supervisor right on top of him just ignore him, says, "Oh, what a dumb, stupid idea," and he had to, go on top of his supervisors and continue pushing that idea until it was finally accepted. But he described how much fighting he had to do in order to even be heard. Then he was successful creating this Comedy Central, which I mean, I love it. I watch it from time to time. Jon Stewart and I don't know the other comedians who bring happiness to our life. And then after, I don't know, a decade in the business, he got fired because internal politics, somebody else was able to get that. I mean, once he was successful, he was a creator, but he wasn't an inside politician, and he just lost his job. It was a good package, but
that's tough. But there's some really interesting things in that story. I didn't know that one. That's really great. I'm going to look Art Bell up. That's very that's really good, because the thing is that there are a few things there. Firstly, it was really tough, is what you say, but he succeeded, right? And if you talk to an entrepreneur about the company that they build, they don't say, "Oh yeah, it was really easy. People just showered me with money because I had an idea." No, they talk about how they sweated hard, they had to get mortgage on their home, or they lived in their parents' house, or whatever they did. It's not easy. And so it's not easy in a corporation, it's not easy as an entrepreneur. It's just different challenges, right? And one of the things is that people like Art Bell, or in my book, I tell the story of this gentleman, Christian Kurtis, in Hungary. He's a manager in this European insurance company, Unica, and he's managing their little business in Hungary. And he sees an opportunity. The opportunity is to create an entirely different digital insurance model. And based on a sort of a Spotify monthly subscription approach, and I can tell you more about it, but it's an entirely different model than they have today. And he says, hey, we could do this, and we could serve our customers much better and at a fraction of the normal cost. And he fights just like Art did. He gets attention and he built a business. Right? Nobody asked him to do it. Nobody says, hey, go build this business. He had the idea, he had the passion, the commitment to do it, the sort of that founder's spirit, essentially, that pushed him forward. So these corporate explorers are just like entrepreneurs in that regard. They have the commitment to a vision. They see a problem in the world that they can solve, and they gather people around them to get it done. How they do that is different, unquestionably. And the skills, the political skills needed to do that are different, no question.
Yeah, I also would like to speak about your chapter number 9, which is risk and reward for corporate, I mean, for these innovators. And, you know, if I'm Adam Newman from WeWork and I bring this idea and I get a gazillion dollars for my idea, even though it doesn't turn out to be a great idea then, but anyway, you know, I think there is a risk that the entrepreneur is taking, and there's a substantial reward for his effort. But somehow I see it within the corporate structure that, I mean, the risk is still there because the reputation of the person is at stake.
Yes.
And maybe he's able to get I mean, if he fails, his ability to get a job somewhere else later on down the road. But the upside, I don't know if it's altogether there. I wonder what's your opinion on that?
Yeah, it's a tough area, no question on that. But part of the issue is that we tend to look at corporate explorers through the lens of the entrepreneur. And although they do some of the same things as I just described, they're not the same. And so to think that they're ever going to stack up and to get the kind of rewards that an entrepreneur gets is a little unreasonable and plausibly not relevant, right? Because it turns out that the people who do this really well, they don't, that isn't their primary motivation. That isn't how they start out. It's just not who they are.
Right.
Doesn't mean they're not successful, right? So one of the people we talk about in the book is Jim Peck at LexisNexis, right? And Jim is now a very successful CEO of Nielsen IQ. He was CEO of Transamerica as well, and before that of LexisNexis Risk Solutions. He's had a really successful career. I don't know his financial rewards, but I'm sure they're pretty attractive over the length of his career. And he's built it just differently from your classic, you know, unicorn CEO. So what that means is, I think, don't obsess about trying to replicate the entrepreneur's, you know, reward recipe, because it's really tough to do. Make sure that they have suitable incentives. I think that is appropriate. Longer term payouts, you know, longer term incentives. Maybe they're less in the short term, more on the long term. So again, it matches the profile of the business. But it's a mistake to think that you have to, you know, make them billionaires in order to get them motivated.
I agree with you on that. Okay, well, can you tell us, your chapter 10 was also interesting, silent killers of exploration. So what are those silent killers? What is preventing someone in middle management or lower management to bring up their ideas? And, you know, I have many theories, but you wrote the book.
Totally. You know, so before we get into like what they are, one of the things that it's really, you know, helps, I think, is if we kind of let go of the assumption about bad intentions, right? That actually managers who are like managing an operational business and, you know, their team member, Alain, comes up with this great idea and they're like, yeah, okay, you can have a go at it, but ultimately it's unsuccessful because of something they do. They don't always intend to kill your idea. They're just doing what seems rational, logical to them, what they've always done, what they know what to do. And one of them is to maximize for short-term returns, right? And to manage risk in a way that is, you know, responsible for their P&L, right? And so this has a logic to it that makes it tough for a corporate explorer, you know, to live within, no question. And one of the things that an organization can do to help the corporate explorer is to change the way they think about the measurement system, right? And so that can help them to think about those risks in a different way. And also really commit to de-risking through experimentation, right? To taking out the risks very, which is what an entrepreneur does, and a venture capital fund does as well, right? And be very deliberate about that, so that the distance between what the risk that a traditional operational manager perceives and what the corporate explorer is managing kind of closes, and it's easier for them to invest.
How about ideas? And you have a chapter in ideation, I think it's called. But how about ideas that are so far-fetched that even though they have been proved successful now in retrospect, it still is hard to imagine that a corporation will adopt it? And I give you my example that I just made up. Imagine that I am Brian Chesky or Joe Gabia, and I work at Mario Corporation. And I bring this idea to the team and say, hey, I have an idea. How about if we get people to rent an Airbnb mattress, an air mattress in the living room, and we'll be famous and rich, and we will even become a verb. I cannot imagine even today someone in that corporate room says, Brian, Joe, that's a fantastic idea. Let's go for it.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, that there are some things I think corporations would really struggle to conceive of. And, I'm not arguing in this book for, abolishing entrepreneurs or startups, right? There are definitely places there they're going to come at a problem in an entirely new way. But, it's also not necessarily the case that, that these ideas don't come from inside corporations, right? Take, this goes back years, but it's still valid. Take, where did the ATM, the bank, automated bank teller machine come from, right? The first one was in the UK, right? Commercialized by a firm called De La Rue. De La Rue recently celebrated its 300th anniversary, and their core business is printing money. Right? It's not putting it into banks. They didn't even serve banks. They weren't a technology firm, but somebody saw the opportunity and built the business, got the backing, had the connections, had the brand, right? To pull this together. So they do happen, these sort of, another one in our book is a little bit unlikely as well, though I suppose was already out there, was this Deloitte Pixel, right? Of Deloitte, this, management consulting, accounting behemoth, actually going into the world of not having employed consultants, but using, crowdsourced idea creation and using, temporary labor pools and all of these kinds of, gig economy techniques in order to serve their clients. It's like a violation of the basic premises of consulting I learned at McKinsey, right? But yet they have been able to do this really quite successfully. And so sometimes corporations surprise you with how willing they are to undertake, more radical ideas. But going back to silent killers, one of the things they face that makes it really tough is when they sort of breach that core professional identity, right? When you break the rules of your industry and you kind of run against what the way things are done around here, that makes it very, very hard. And it made it hard for Balaji Bondili at Deloitte, but he was successful. He managed to gather around him enough of a leadership movement to get support for the opportunity that he saw.
Okay, well, Andy, I would like to play this scenario with you.
Yeah.
So let's say that I am the CEO of a business and I say, Andy, COVID-19 have destroyed my whole industry, not only mine, but all my competitors are struggling. I am open for new ideas. I want my team to feel, I want to encourage my team to bring new ideas because I don't have boots on the ground, as you may say. How could I get my team to bring ideas and feel safe that are not going to be criticized, that they're going to be considered, and I'm open to all kinds of suggestions. So that's my problem. Yeah. I'm asking you for help. How can I encourage my team to just bring up these ideas and give them assurance that they're going to be at least considered?
So I would start by getting really curious yourself about customer problems, right? Because one of the things that a leader needs to think about in that situation you described is like, how curious are you? How excited are you to learn about what customers are doing? Because yeah, there are many industries that are getting destroyed by COVID, and hospitality and restaurants and all this kind. But there are many that are booming, right? And there are many new things that are being developed. So go learn about those, because if you're a learner, right? If you're really enthusiastic to learn about what customers need to get done right now, what they're struggling with, what they're interested in doing that they can't do today, then you can invite your employees to do the same with you, right? So don't look for them to come with you with ideas. Look for them to come to you with real problems in the world that they think that they can solve. And if you can, see yourself as being a problem solver and solve problems better than anybody else, you'll find new sources of value.
Okay. Okay, personal curiosity. Well, my problem is no, my problem is that I'm afraid. I'm afraid of my business. I'm afraid that my shareholders are going to be upset at me. So it's not so much my own curiosity. It's just fear that is guiding me to finally, after decades of being stubborn, I'm open for for new ideas. That's my new mindset. So I guess you're
and
saying
people
I have
get
to
stuck.
change.
Yeah,
Yeah.
people get stuck in a mindset. Absolutely right. If this is the only thing I do, this is the only thing I can do. And one of the thing about 2022 is you've got to learn to manage uncertainty. If you try to take us back to pre-pandemic stability and manage for a world that no longer exists, there's only one way you're going to go. So yeah, you've got to do some of the cost management. You've got to skinny down, but if you're going to reinvent your business in 2022, you've got to find, what is it that we can do that nobody else, can do? What problems can we solve that if we did so, we would excite our customers, and often our current customers. And if you can stay focused on that, then you can commit to this kind of reinvention, this recreation that for some is an essential part of survival this year.
Okay, so I had to change my mindset. Is there some kind of framework that I could I don't know, put in the bulletin board or in our business newsletter, saying to our employees, hey, if you do this, or let's meet once a week to bring up new ideas, or what do you suggest
Sure.
I should do in order to start this ball rolling and start the ideation of our business?
Yeah. So I would start by declaring an ambition. I would say, I want this business to be this. Right. I want it to be, maybe I want it to be, $1 billion. Say you're going to grow rapidly. But the financial target it's important, but it's not everything. How about if I want to make this difference to the world, right? I want to be this important to the world, and maybe it is something like your Airbnb example. I want to change the way that people think about travel and accommodation, right? Or I want to reinvent the way that we think about hospitality or restaurants or whatever. Go from your ambition and then think about, okay, where's the most where are the places where I could most likely make a difference to that, right? When we call those hunting zones, right? So in the book, we talk about Ajay Banga at MasterCard, and he set this really bold ambition. I want to end cash. I want to fight a war against cash, right? Because for him, it's all about electronic payment. At the time, MasterCard were really the loser versus Visa. And all they did was credit card transaction processing, right? It's a very narrow part of the business. Although we see them on our card, what they actually historically have done is a pretty narrow part of the payments industry. And he added new hunting zones to the business to find new places where they could do electronic payments, right? And throughout, it was all guided by, tell me how we can end cash. How can we convert more of the 85% of transactions in the world that are cash-based into digital, And this is the same logic. What are my ambition? Where are the places I think I could make most difference to that? And then that's where I invite my employees in. And I say, tell me, how can we get there in this place? Like, with respect to this customer or this problem or whatever it might be, and get them to pull their ideas forward, to come up with what it would take to solve problems in that area. And then the best ones you take out and you start to do experimentation with it, right? So this is about ideation, incubation, and then scaling of new ideas. And the ideation piece can be democratic. You can invite involvement and participation, but at some point you've got to end the democracy and you've got to move into a more disciplined, what's the best idea here really? And where am I going to put my money? And that is a tough human challenge because nobody wants to say no to a great idea, right? You've got to be able to select out the very best and then subject them to this sort of experimental methodology.
Well, Andy, I think everyone in corporate America or anyone in corporate globally should read your book. I wonder if you could tell us one more time the title of the book and where can the listeners follow the work that you're doing? So
it is Corporate Explorer, How Corporations Beat Startups at the Innovation Game. And if you go to thecorporateexplorer.com, you can learn more about it. It comes out February 2nd.
Andy, thank you so much for your time.
Thanks, Alain. I appreciate it.